I am Naomi. I use she, her pronouns. I teach in the Theology and Religious Studies department here at Villanova. And I clearly am a pacer, a walker, while I'm on the phone and while I'm teaching. So I'll be walking around. I want to just take a kind of random poll just so I know who's in the room. I won't make you say anything, but if you are a part of the student community here at Villanova, you are a student, grad student, undergrad student, yeah, cool. If you are a member of the faculty or staff here at Villanova, okay, good stuff. And let me just get a sense, who was here last week? So I get a sense, okay. So I will kind of rush through the slides that we went over last week, just so that everybody feels like we've shared in kind of sort of the same conversation before we get to new stuff this week, okay? Good. So the Bible in Black. Last week, we talked a lot about why we even need to perhaps wear some different kind of glasses when we read the Bible. Why is it important to perhaps have a racialized view of the Bible? And we talked about the history and use of the Bible in an American context. This is a picture, the caption is probably too small for you to read. Bishop Mackenzie preaching to the Negroes. Yeah. So the Bible has a checkered past on this soil. The Bible has been used in ways to subordinate people, including people who belong to a particular racial or ethnic group. Yeah. So we, first of all, start the conversation by disabusing ourselves of the idea that the Bible has ever been read objectively. That's when I get in trouble. That the Bible is always read through the lens of the reader. And that lens has been formed and shaped by social and political contexts. Right? So, one question this invites me to ask is, what good news was Bishop Mackenzie sharing with these enslaved folk? What was his read? And what read did he transmit to his listeners, those first listeners? The Bible is complicated in terms of its use, historically and in contemporary life. Right? Jesus saves what? Jesus saves who from what? Well, I don't know. I think that the people in this room might have a very particular answer to that question that might differ from the answer I might have or the answer you might have sitting here in 2022. Yeah? Lest we think it's only a historical phenomenon. Right? This was taken at a rally in 2020. And made its way around the internet. There's a particular kind of understanding employed here, biblical understanding. Yeah. So we said, here's one more. 2,000 years ago, Jesus ended the debate of which lives matter. He died for all. Appeals to universality are typically welcome. And yet, how does this clash with, right, the articulation of Black Lives Matter in 2022? So we set up the conversation last week by saying that the Bible's historical use and contemporary use is fraught with bumps, to put it mildly, fraught with a history of violence, neglect, spiritual abuse. And so when we endeavor to read the Bible blackly, which I'll get to, we are trying to take seriously this history and in some ways correct our spiritual imagination. We talked about imagination last week, right? That the Bible, reading the Bible is based on, the act of reading the Bible is based on a particular kind of imaginative worldview. And what if this is an invitation to dismantle what already exists in our imagination and construct something that feels more loving, more holy, more connected to the gospel as good news? So that's the groundwork we laid last week. And then we looked at some scriptures, right? We went through Genesis and we talked about the freedom story found there, the Exodus story found there. And we asked some questions like, to what degree is liberty contingent on oppression? Even in the Bible, that to set the Hebrew children free, somebody had to go. The Canaanites, the Hittites, we reread the story of the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. Right? We said here were vulnerable women who had very little power, but a certain kind of holy skill set. Right? And they took advantage of the fact that the state, that Pharaoh and them, didn't have the same skill set. They didn't know nothing about birthing no babies. So they left that up to the midwives. The midwives had their own spiritual authority. They had their own idea about justice. And they said, listen, we're going to work within the boundaries of our social location to bring forth life and not condone death. They were given the order to kill excuse me, to kill the boy children. They defied that order. And we said, this sounds black. The making a way out of no way, the resistance to death-dealing empire, the decision to bring forth life, to use your skill set to bring forth life, even at great cost and great risk to you. We read through this story of King David interacting with the Gibeonites. There was a famine in the land, the text says. And David discovers that the famine is because David's predecessor, Saul, had done violence to the Gibeonite community. And so David makes this deal with the Gibeonites. He says, all right, I know that there was bloodshed in your community, and that's why we're experiencing this ecological dryness, barrenness. What if I give you blood, our blood, Saul's blood? Gibeonites are like, all right, we'll take it. And they killed 7 of Saul's sons. Remember this we said? But those sons had families. Those sons had mothers. One of those mothers was Rizpah. And Rizpah Though she can't do anything to prevent the king's decision to put these 7 boys to death, to make this political deal work, she says, I'm not going to let it go. This is not going to become just another casualty of war. I'm going to sit there with the bodies of those 7 boys, 2 of them her own. And I'm going to make myself visible to the point where I might even embarrass the king. I'm going to draw attention to myself and these bodies where David would rather not. And so the text goes on to say, David finds out what she's doing, sitting vigil with those bodies, refusing to forget these boys. And David makes the decision to bury them, first of all, extending to them that dignity. And then the famine was over. And we talked about this grieving mother. I just preached a sermon, what's today? Tuesday. Just preached a sermon Sunday called Mothers of the Movement. This idea that there are some who unwillingly make sacrifices, who lose, so that the movement can progress. Mothers of the movement. But nobody wants to join that club. Right? Rispa, we might say, is a mother of the movement. We looked at Abraham, right? This classic story. Abraham has a son, Isaac, takes Isaac to the top of Mount Moriah, and on God's order, nearly kills Isaac. And we talked about, what if we moved Abraham out of the center of our interpretation and put Isaac there? Isaac, threatened by the faith of his father, by a God who wants everything, including your child. And we said, how might somebody who's lost everything behind faith read this text? How might the Isaacs of 2022 read this text? Those who feel like they are laying on the altar of the church. And every time the knife nearly kills them, there is a bell and they're saved. What kind of trauma that might be, right? So we move to the New Testament. And, I couldn't decide. I just picked a bunch of my favorite passages. This is one of them, Mark chapter 5. It'll be familiar, probably, to you. I'll read the Naomi adaptation of the text. So they came to the country of the Gerasenes. And when he, Jesus, had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs. Nobody could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. Often he had been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he broke apart. The shackles he broke in pieces. Nobody had the strength to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and hurting himself, cutting himself with stones. Let's pause. Now, I was taught to read this scripture, kind of rushing through this part so we can get to the action, which is Jesus doing something miraculous, right? But if we just stop and read what's on the page, what do we know about this man? Use your imagination. What do we know about him? Mm-hmm. Why is he a real threat and a danger? How do we know this?
Acting out of the norm of the way non-threatening, non-dangerous people would act.
Like what?
Like not yelling and screaming and breaking chains and acting out of the ordinary.
Okay. Do we know if he was doing that before he started living in the tombs? Yes. Uh-huh. How do we know? Huh. And what's an unclean spirit? Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. So, what we get, the biography of this man seems to pick up here. You know, like if you read my biography, you're going to start in Detroit, Michigan, on the west side, 1980, and then, right, we don't get any of that. Does he have brothers and sisters? We don't know. What does his father do? We don't know. Did he finish school? We don't know. But we pick up here. Now, if I don't get sleep after maybe 36 hours, guess what I'm going to be doing? Yelling and screaming, probably banging my head against the wall, right? I don't want you to catch me there. I don't want you to pick up my bio there. Pick up my bio on the west side of Detroit. Come meet my mother and my father. I got a little brother. But we pick up here, somebody said he has an unclean spirit. But we don't quite know. We have what we would think constitute unclean spirit. You know. But the more you learn, the more vocabulary you have to describe what's going on. Before whoever discovered asthma, I'm sure a lot of people were heaving and coughing. I have asthma. Wheezing, and people were like, well, what's wrong with her? Something's wrong with her. And then somebody was like, no. What happens is, in the lungs, there are these sacs, and then I'm just pushing because we really don't know. We fill in gaps. And I'm affirming that practice. We do that with everything we read. We try to fill in some blanks. But this seems to be set up such that the man is already the bad guy in our minds once we start reading. He doesn't get a history. He doesn't get a story. We don't know why he's living in the cemetery, y'all. The place where people go after they are dead. But he's been sent there. You know, he didn't answer a realtor ad on Zillow, right? He probably didn't choose to be living in the cemetery. He was sent there. And so one question is, why is he living among the tombs? Why does the society say he's got an unclean spirit? What kind of pain is he in such that he is yelling and screaming and hurting himself? as a clergy person, I'm a mandated reporter, that if somebody is talking to me and they seem like they're going to hurt themselves, they're a danger to themselves or other people, I am mandated to do what? I need to get on the phone. I need to call somebody. I don't put the person in my car and take them to the cemetery and drop them off and leave them there. So I'm just suggesting that perhaps this man has a story that isn't being told here. Jesus gets out of the, yes.
I can say prior, because we all right, went to Sunday school and we read it then.
Yep.
And then I feel like sometimes you get too much education, but then once you get behavioral health training, as I'm sure you have, as I have, I've read it. And it said to me someone was having a mental health crisis.
Mm.
That's what it said to me.
Mm.
And you treat it differently.
Mm.
The text you read differently at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, I said to myself, oh, I'm calling my homeless team, I'm calling the nurse, I'm calling people for the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that labeling it unclean spirit isn't still an accurate statement as a person who believes in Christ, but still saying the dignity is still required.
Okay.
The love of Christ is still
Okay.
required
Mm-hmm.
in us to treat them with dignity
Mm-hmm.
and love, even in the crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and dropping them off the tombs isn't the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I read it differently then.
Mm-hmm.
Still understanding what's,
Mm-hmm.
and believing it. I read it differently. It was
Mm.
different for me
Mm.
after
the training.
education.
Sure. And I even wonder, there's training that kind of crystallizes, all right, what am I looking at here? You take mental health first aid, they teach you how to put words to what you're seeing. But even if I read the text without all of that training, but I'm bringing a curiosity and a humility to the text, not as if I already know what's going on, but as if I'm trying to inquire, I'm trying to understand, who is this guy? Where does he come from? What's his story? That causes me to slow down and not rush to Jesus saving the day. That's still, it's still coming. But if we read slowly, we pick up on, wait a minute, the tombs? Is that a metaphor? The actual tombs? You mean like the cemetery? Pause. Right? Okay. Jesus is coming. He sees Jesus coming from a distance, and he runs and bows down before Jesus and shouts, "What have you to do with me, Jesus? Don't torment me." Pause. People living among the tombs, having been sent away, are not supposed to know Jesus, recognize Jesus, reverence and worship Jesus. That's a strange. Jesus had said to the man, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." So Jesus is already doing this thing where Jesus is separating what is happening to you from who you are. That's a sermon. Jesus is not saying, "You, dude with the unclean spirit, go away." Jesus is saying, "Unclean spirit, leave this man alone." Jesus says, "What is your name?" Stop. So the man is not merely a plot device to get to the miracle. We talked about that last week. The man has his own story and his own name. The way you know I respect you, I'm trying to get to know you. What's your name? I call you by your name. So Jesus is like, what's your name? And the man says, my name is Legion, for we are many. Stop. That seems odd. And so, do we just gloss over that and assume that, oh, that's something from the ancient world? Or do we inquire, what does that mean? What's Legion? Why would he answer that way? Anybody know? What's Legion? What do we make of this answer? Yeah, Father.
I'd say, I mean, the Legion is the Roman army.
Mm-hmm.
Occupiers. They were there to oppress those people.
Uh-huh.
And one interpretation would be this person is identified with the oppressors.
Legion, kind of like a denomination of Roman soldiers, right? 500 soldiers. He says that's his name. So if these unclean spirits are inside of him, we might well use the word occupation to describe what's going on. He is occupied by the Roman military. Subject to, brainwashed by, in some kind of possessive relationship with the Roman military. What do we make of that? Is he lost it? What's going on? Why would he respond in that way? That's a rhetorical question. We can't ask the man. But the point is, we haven't gotten to the miracle part because we're slowly reading the text. Verse 10, the man begged Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the country. So there was a herd of swine over there, and the unclean spirits begged Jesus, don't send us completely away. Send us into those swine. We need a host. We are a parasite. What we do is occupy. We need a host. And so Jesus is like, all right. And the unclean spirits came out of the man and entered the swine. This is bizarre. A bunch of possessed swine. 2,000. Rushing down the bank into the sea and were drowned. The swineherds, the folk who were trying to keep the pigs, why would there be pigs? Were pigs pets? What were the pigs there for? Right. I mean, lots of bacon. No. But this was an economic pathway, these pigs. And so Jesus sends the unclean spirit, the occupying force, into the pigs, and the swineherds are pissed. Not only are they pissed that their pigs have lost it, but it says, verse 15, they came to Jesus, saw the demoniac. He doesn't get a name. He's associated by his condition. Sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. They didn't throw a party. They didn't celebrate. They were afraid. And verse 16 says, those who had seen what had happened reported it, and they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. Now, why would they do this? Why don't they want Jesus around anymore? Why? What you think? Yeah. Mm. Mm. How dare you, Jesus, interrupt our way of doing things? How dare you pluck the man out of the cemetery where we sent him? And whatever you did, he's now sitting there clothed and in his right mind. What's in it for the society to have some folk locked away, out of sight, out of mind? And the divine hand of liberation comes and unlocks the door. And all of these people we thought we'd never have to deal with are sitting here clothed and in their right mind. They were afraid and they were pissed. They want Jesus to leave. Yes.
And in addition to that, society values certain people's property more than they value people's lives.
You took away our stuff. I don't care that it was to set this man free. I don't care that pigs can be replaced, theoretically. You took away our stuff, and you took away our economic livelihood. This is how we make money. This is what gives us status. The people want Jesus to leave, so you know this man is like, oh, listen, can I come with you? That's verse 18. Jesus is like, no, go home to your friends. Tell them what the Lord has done for you. Tell them how you've experienced divine mercy. And so he goes on and becomes an evangelist for this guy named Jesus, who wasn't afraid to come see about him at the cemetery, who asked him what his name was. Maybe the first person to do that in a long time. Okay. Y'all with me? Y'all going? Let's go together. Okay. Let's look at another text. This is immediately after, this Mark 5. You can tell that I just love Mark 5. This is immediately after the story that we just considered. Jesus got back in the boat, crossed again to the other side. A crowd gathered around him. And one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came up to him and says, listen, Jesus, my daughter is dying. Come and lay your hands on her so she can live again. We don't have the conversation here. Like, what did Jesus say? How did it? So again, we're filling in some blanks. Jesus says, all right, I'll be there. But there's this crowd, he can't get away from the crowd. The crowd is pressing in on him. And in the middle of Jesus' journey to Jairus' house, he is interrupted. There was a woman who had been suffering, bleeding, hemorrhaging for 12 long years. She had gone to all of the doctors in the community, spent all her money, and she wasn't getting better. In fact, she was getting worse. Stop. That sounds like a familiar refrain for so many people. Yeah? Chronic condition, you've had it for years and years and years, and you've exhausted all of your resources trying to get some help. You've gone from doctor to doctor to doctor, and you're not getting better, you're getting worse. Not only physically, but maybe psychologically. And then let's think about this woman's social location, right? She's a woman. There's no description of a family. Does she have people? Is she going by herself to the doctor? Does she have an advocate? You know, you get admitted to the hospital these days, there's a patient advocate that comes to your room so that you have somebody else pleading your case to the hospital. It's intimidating. You got doctors and nurses and other kind. I don't know anything about anything. I need somebody to advocate on my behalf. Does she have an advocate? And then wait a minute, she's bleeding. So she doesn't have like a chronic cough. Oh, sometimes my eyes water. No, she's bleeding. And what do we know about that in the ancient world? We understood a lot less then than we do now. That bleeding was an impurity, something to be shunned. She'd been bleeding for 12 years. So here's her situation. Before we rush to get to Jesus, doing Jesus stuff, let's slow down and get to know this woman. You've met this woman. You know this woman. Maybe you've been this woman. You are desperate. And so you heard that Jesus is in town. Stop right there. Again, we ought to be careful who we declare knows God, knows Jesus. She knows Jesus. She heard about what Jesus can do, and she heard that Jesus is coming today. And so she makes her way to the crowd at great risk to herself. She's putting herself in humiliation's way. And she meets, Jesus. Her thought process is, listen, if I can just touch Jesus, I know I'll be made well. She's not a cursory Jesus follower. She's got some faith. She believes that thing. And so she makes this plan to encounter Jesus. Not to bother him. She didn't say, oh, I'm going to have a conversation or I'm going to invite Jesus out to tea. No. She's like, if I can just sneak. She touched him. Verse 29 says, Mark is always in a hurry. Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped. And she felt that she was healed. And then immediately, Jesus understood something happened. My energy changed. He turns around and says, who touched me? Somebody touched me. The woman, parenthetically, the disciples are like, Jesus, really? It's a crowd, Jesus. You're going to be touched. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him what? The whole truth. Imagine her testimony. Listen, Jesus, I've been bleeding for 12 years. I went to everybody and nobody could help me. I just thought that if I could just get close to you, Jesus. At great risk to herself, she tells the whole truth. And Jesus says, your faith is what has made you well. Go on and be healed. Love this story. Not only because of this ending, but because what I can imagine in my mind's eye about this woman and her faith. That she was going to, by any means necessary, get to her healing. That she didn't care about the embarrassment of having to crawl, see it, to get to the hem of Jesus's cloak. Then if we keep reading, Jesus leaves the woman and proceeds to go to Jairus'. Remember, he was on his way there. He's headed to Jairus' house, but somebody got word to Jesus before he got there. Jairus' daughter died. Jesus is cool, calm, and collected, says, don't worry about it. I'm coming. Don't be afraid. Trust. Just believe. Gets to Jairus' house. Verse 38. There was a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. They had started the wake, y'all. We're not talking about, 10 minutes later, he pulls up. No, this would have been a while. And so Jesus gets there. The wake has already begun. The grieving rituals have already begun. Jesus is like, why y'all crying? She's not dead. She only asleep. They laughed. He put everybody out, took the little girl by the hand and says, get up. Immediately, Mark is in a hurry. The girl gets up, starts to walk. She's 12 years old. They give her something to eat, etc. Anybody ever had to wait on Jesus? I mean, you don't have to answer that question. How does it feel to be in the place between the last healing and the next healing? I grew up in a church tradition where they said that God was always right on time. You know, that might be true. And sometimes people die waiting on Jesus. What's the word to Jairus' wife? What's the word to Jairus? Who, as a leader of the synagogue, was thinking, okay, I got Jesus on speed dial. Jairus is not the woman crawling to get to Jesus. Jairus has some status, has some clout, and Jairus had to wait? Preached a sermon on this text called When Jesus Runs Late. Because some people are in that waiting place. Some people are looking at the dead thing, wondering, is resurrection possible? They are Jairus in the story. They are Jairus' family in the story. How do we give them voice? This is not taking anything away from Jesus and what Jesus comes in to do. And it slows us down to acknowledge that even if the miracle is coming, I am agonizing in the waiting. All right, let's leave Mark alone and come on to John. This is also a story you're probably familiar with. John 18. Jesus had just got through preaching and went out with his disciples. No, this is wrong story. Jesus is out with his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. So we know what's going down. Yeah? I appreciate how other gospel versions of this narrative say a little bit more about the fact that Jesus said to the disciples, will y'all just go over there and wait for me? I'm going to pray. I need y'all to just go, stay with me, go over there and wait. And they fall asleep. Anywho. Verse 2, Judas knew that Jesus and them were going to be at the garden. We know that Judas has nefarious intentions. And so verse 3, Judas brought some soldiers and the police to the garden. They didn't come in suits and ties and legal pads. They came with what? Weapons, torches, lanterns. Stop. I never saw this scene in the garden as an arrest for a long time. I wasn't taught that this was, but you in the garden praying, and here come the police, sirens blaring, guns drawn to come pick you up. Jesus knew what was getting ready to happen, comes forward and says, verse 4, who are you looking for? Who are you here for? They say, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus says, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. Other versions of this text have Judas kissing Jesus. Remember that? This betrayal of intimacies. Somebody who knows me well, threw me under the bus, knows me well enough to come up to me and hug and kiss me. If you're looking for me, take me. Let these people go. I have a hard time reading this text in 2022 and not thinking about unjust arrests, violent arrests, no-knock warrants. You just chilling in your house and somebody blasts through the... At least they had the fortitude to specify who they were looking for and check and make sure. But we here in 2022 are reading headlines about people who have no time to even react before they are killed behind a no-knock warrant. You might say it's a stretch, but what if we read this alongside headlines about police brutality? Alongside headlines about people being arrested on made-up charges, misidentified. Let's go to Acts. Another phase, Acts 8. Philip. So Jesus has died, arisen, left, and we now have the remnant, the movement, the Jesus movement, trying to sustain itself. So we've got Philip. Philip is told through the messenger of God, go down south. Find Wilderness Road, which we could just stop right there and have a whole conversation. Wilderness Road, the road that leads from Jerusalem to Gaza. Go there. And so Philip does so and finds an Ethiopian eunuch. Pause. What's that? Hard to really understand fully the significance of this encounter without knowing something about the context here, right? This is a person, anybody know? What's a eunuch? Kind of, sort of. Social status? No. What kind of position? So is a court official of the queen. So has some proximity to power, for sure. But is not the person with the power. Important to know. Important to know that this person would have been perhaps alienated or considered abnormal because of his body. But he's got a domain of authority. He's riding in the carriage. He works for the queen. He had been to worship and was going home, and he was reading from Isaiah. Stop right there. So the first people who heard this text would have been like, what? Reading what? Went to worship? They might have been surprised to see this Ethiopian eunuch in this particular situation. The Spirit says to Philip, go over to him and have a conversation. Go. And so Philip, I guess, instead of saying, hey, I'm Philip, Philip says, do you even know what you're reading? The eunuch is like, well, I mean, I'm trying, but I can't. I need somebody to help me. And so then they have this little Bible study together. It's great. They have a Bible study together, reading this text. Like a sheep, he was led to the slaughter, lamb silent before he doesn't open his mouth, never said a mumbling word. Blah, blah, blah. The eunuch says, so who are we talking about here that was led like a sheep to the slaughter? Is the prophet talking about himself or somebody else? So listen, this is, I think, an interpretive exegetical example set by the Ethiopian eunuch, how to read the text, asking questions of it. Who are we talking about here? Philip says, oh, well, let me tell you then, Jesus and the good news. And so they're having a wonderful Bible study here. And as they were going along the road, they came to some water. The pool of water on Wilderness Road. The eunuch says, well, listen, here's some water. Can I be baptized now? Philip is like, well, I guess so. It is water here, and we just need water to baptize. I love this story. It's such a reminder, right? That the way we've always done things does not have to be the way we always do things. I know we're supposed to have a baptismal pool. We're supposed to have the font. We're supposed to have, but and I know only some people are supposed to read the prophet Isaiah to interpret it. But this busts up all of the traditions that we think are sacred cows. I'm not knocking tradition. And when presented with an opportunity to share good news and to remind somebody of this idea that which goes down dead can come up alive, we're going to take that opportunity. Why did I show you all of these scriptures? Well, the last 5 minutes I got. I think that there are some questions that we are invited to ask if we want to read the Bible blackly, is what I'm calling it. Right? What does freedom mean in this text? Who is free? Who is silenced? Who doesn't get to speak, but you know they have to be there? Who's missing? What perspectives are missing? The woman caught in adultery? Do we get to hear from her? Nope. Where is the stubborn joy? Where is the joy that will surface regardless of the circumstance? And where is pain lingering? So Jairus' daughter has been resurrected, thanks be to God, and is there some lingering pain? Lingering grief? The trauma of having thought that your child was dead? What is the good news? And is it good news for everybody or just some folk? More questions as you read the text. Have you accounted for the context of the reading? In other words, what's going on in the world of the writer? And what's going on in the word of those original listeners? And Have I accounted for my own context? Because again, we're not reading as blank slates. We have lived experiences that we bring to any text that we're reading. This, by the way, is called Mother of Ferguson. The person who designed this icon shared it with some priests. Priest posted it on Facebook. Priest got death threats. Why? What about this is untrue? That Jesus was a problem, even in the womb. That Jesus had a target on his back. Why? Because of the way he lived and his refusal to abide by death-dealing rules. How is real life a sacred text that I'm reading alongside the Bible? That is to say, when I read about the arrest of Jesus, do I have the arrest of my neighbor in mind? This is called Jose y Maria. Jose y Maria, by a cartoonist named Eugene Patterson. Mark Dooley is the icon artist from before. Right? We got these kids. One goes to Nazareth High School. We got these kids who need a place to go. Working class folk. Question, am I reading what's actually on the page or what I want to be there? We can acknowledge that the Bible has some stuff that we say yikes to. Lots of violence, lots of. And so I think reading Blackley is about refusing to read what's not there, but reading what's there. And we don't have to throw away the Bible because it has yikes moments, but we owe it an honest reading. And humility. We talked about this last week. That reading the Bible Blackley and justly, I think requires us to say, what if I'm wrong? What if the understanding that my priest, my pastor, my Sunday school teacher gave to me is actually not the most just or gracious reading of the text? Why am I invested? This is an important question. Why am I invested in this particular understanding of the text? Why is it that I can only read Abraham and Isaac from a perspective that valorizes Abraham and his faith? And I'm unable to see that, okay, yeah, Isaac didn't die, but that family system was severely disrupted by this act. Why? Because we're talking about human beings. We have investments in certain ways of understanding the Bible. And what I invite us to do is just be honest about those investments. Who benefits from the conclusion that I'm drawing from this text? Who loses? I cannot find the author of this or the artist, but I use it every time I can. Right? What are our investments in particular understandings of the Bible? All right. Y'all okay? Is it time to go? Any reactions? This is called the creation of God. The creation of God, as opposed to the creation of Adam, which is Michelangelo's classic, by an Afro-Latina woman named Harmonia Rosales, who's based in Chicago. She posted this on Instagram. Guess what? Death threats. Why? Right? What's the investment in, oh, no, I need him to be a man. I need him to be pale-skinned. I need this to be. So all I'm saying is that reading Blackly interrogates the investments that we have and tries to eke out something liberative for all people, not just for some. Questions, comments, challenges, throw tomatoes, anything, anybody? Oh, thank you, Father Art. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm on a mission for us to just slow down in our reading. That's really just slow down, right? And ask questions. God can take our questions. That's what's so good about God. All right. I don't want to keep you longer than I said I would. It's 1:06. Thank you so much.